Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering sex education, Season 4, Episode 8, the final episode. Well, we're saying goodbye to everybody, and despite my concerns about the setting up of plots, I actually was pretty satisfied with where things ended up for most of our characters. I think I'm good with this finale, but I am, just for the record, really sad that the show's over. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Ashleigh for commissioning this episode. Ashleigh, I don't know if you're here in the chat today, but appreciate you so much. I believe Ashleigh was like the only person to commission all of the episodes for all of the seasons. So big investment, and it was just so much fun to talk about, and it was really fun to rewatch with Owen too. And I would, like, without reservation, say that this is one of, like, the top 5, at least, maybe 3 shows that Netflix has made. It was not a perfect finale, but it was much better than I was worried it would be, based on the way that certain plot elements had been set up earlier in the season. I'm going to talk about a couple things that I kind of, you guys probably noticed that I spent way too much time talking about Jean and Joanna's relationship last time, because it just hit a particular nerve for me. And that caused me to not only go over my time, but I didn't talk about a couple of major things that happened. So, first of all, we have Jackson and his diagnosis. I just really want an answer from everybody. Have you ever been called into the doctor's office when your diagnosis was normal? Has that ever happened? I got really, really angry at the show for this. I really felt a way about it. Like, it just seemed they did something kind of cheap for no good reason. They needed to give Jackson some kind of storyline, and they didn't seem to really know what to do for him. And with the way that it wound up, it's not that I wanted him to have cancer. It was that I wanted the concern that he had cancer to matter more in terms of, like, impact for his attitude for the future. And I guess that's what it did in terms of his finding out who his father is. So I just sort of wish that we had focused more on that and less on the diagnosis itself. I think that the point is supposed to be facing the prospect of being ill. He doesn't want to miss his chance to know who his father is, that there is suddenly an urgency that he wouldn't feel otherwise. But, or, that it's about the, like, his history of the health on that side of the family. But yeah, I just really didn't like that they call him in and then they just tell him everything is fine. I have never heard of anyone being called in to, quote, discuss your results, unquote, when your results weren't a problem. It's always just something that you can either, you get a call about and be like, hey, your test results were negative, all good. And they, like, leave a voicemail. Or you'll get an email and they'll be like, you can see your results on the portal. And they usually don't tell you to look at your results on the portal before it's been told to you that there is an issue. So anyway, it just bugged me, because it just felt like, why are you doing this? Why are you trying to play this scare tactic, guys? However, I did actually really like where it turned out Jackson came from, because what it turns out happened. He finds letters in his mother's drawer that are very salacious. And he there's like an address on it or a name, and he is able to track this guy down. And he doesn't respond the way any of us, including Jackson, were hoping. As soon as he sees Jackson and Jackson begins to say who he is and who his mother is, you can see this guy begin to panic. And once he says, I think you're my and he doesn't even like fully get the word out. This dude just says, leave my property, and slams the door in his face. And like, it's pretty brutal. I mean, I was not prepared for him to be so hostile, outright hostile. I could see somebody who wasn't prepared for this information and wasn't taking it super well, but I didn't think that they would seem to sort of lash out at Jackson himself. And what we find out is that his mother had an affair. This man was married. And I really like this because this is just the reality of human nature. I really feel like we try to pretend that people who have affairs, either while they themselves are in a relationship or with somebody who is in a relationship, are like the real outliers. But the truth is, there are very few people that I know personally who haven't been in situations where they were involved with somebody and the ethics behind it were questionable. And I'm not trying to say that those people, like, that was the majority of their relationships. I am saying that most people I know have had a situation like that at least once in their lives. And a lot of us try to like bury that because it's bad PR. It doesn't look good for us. And I really, really understand that impulse. But for me, this is part of me like wanting to really own what I did to Brendan. I was married, you know, and I was like checked out of the marriage, and he was too, but I was still married. And I was talking to other men, and that, like, I met Owen while I was married. Owen was like a podcast listener. And I wound up leaving my husband for a man on the internet that I had never met, is basically what happened. And a lot of people would say that that shows that I am a bad person. And, you know, I can't even like really argue. I feel like everybody is sort of a bad person. There are times where we can all be put in positions where we wind up doing bad things that we otherwise wouldn't consider would be in line with our character. But looking back, I did a shitty thing. I made a bad choice, you know? And while I don't regret being with him, and I'm really pleased with the direction my life went in leaving Brendan, and I wouldn't want to go back and change what I did because it might alter something, I also do wish that I had handled things differently, that I had been better, that I had been more upfront. And it's a really delicate balance between like growing as a person and understanding the mistakes that you've made and just straight up like regretting actions you took. You know, there are going to be some things that you just regret. And for me, the regret was how I treated my ex-husband. He didn't deserve it, and I should have been better. And I don't feel like we get the kind of like representation of people who are older and in who are in like a position of authority as copping to past mistakes they've made in a way that they are given grace for. So often, this sort of reveal about who his father is, the way this person responds to it initially, like Jackson at first is just like the fuck, and he just leaves, you know, he just doesn't want to speak to them, and he gets really pissed about the way he's been lied to this whole time. And I see a lot of storylines where that's sort of what happens, and this winds up being like the straw that causes them to not want to speak to that person anymore, or it's sort of treated as like, well, now that they see the truth about this person. And I really like the fact that eventually he comes around. His mother is like, I'm not proud of this. I tried to do the right thing. I told him about you. I sent him pictures. He sent back everything unopened. And I just think that a lot of us would be really surprised to see what is in the pasts of the people that we respect and love and think would never do something like this. Because I just believe it's a lot more common than we are led to believe. And again, I am not by any means saying that is good. I am just saying that is human. And I really appreciate that his mother isn't cast in a light where it seems like she's just overall a less trustworthy person now. There are definitely people out there who do this sort of shady thing in relationships, and they don't learn from it, and they keep doing it, and they keep hurting people, and they keep sort of getting away with it, and they don't really learn, or they don't get away with it, and they still don't learn. But some of us do the shitty thing, and we learn, and are just sort of like, wow, I cannot believe I did that. Like, to this day, oh man, wow, that was really shitty. And I think that as long as you come out the other side, like, respecting the fact that you are not a perfect person, and despite thinking you wouldn't do some things, now you realize there are times when you would, and you understand that about yourself and that sort of dark side a little bit more, that makes you a better person, in my opinion. You know, it's like what they call shadow work. The girlies in the witchy community are going to know what I'm talking about. Facing up to the parts of yourself that you're not proud of, the parts of yourself that you try to suppress or ignore. That sort of thing is necessary, or else you don't grow at all. So anyway, I really felt for Jackson and the fact that his father just really took a shit on him. It was awful. And I like the fact that they gave room for him to forgive his mom and for them to like be a unified front again, you know? So, okay. I'm watching this fucking opening, guys. I had forgotten what Roman's doing, because Roman is decorating the room with rose petals and has like, I think like fresh cherries or strawberries or something. And he is wearing this like feathered robe, and Abby comes in and the lights are low and there's sexy music playing. And Roman says, just wanted to do a little something special. No pressure. And I was like, Roman, I am so sorry. I feel for you that you're frustrated with your sex life with Abby, but you cannot set the room up like this and then claim no pressure. I'm sorry. Those are not congruous to each other. It's not giving no pressure at all. Ooh, Ashleigh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see your comment. Crazy day, had to catch a flight and everything. Ooh, my doctor recently sent me test results back with a smiley face and thumbs up. I love it. Amazing. So yeah, this scene, it's very clear that Abby is not on board. Like, she's just feeling weird about it. And she tries to sort of set aside how she's feeling and goes up to Roman and begins kissing him. And there's just, you know, a real attempt. And I will tell you what, kids, I am so curious how you guys reacted to this, because as soon as they begin kissing and Roman begins moaning, I was like, Roman, I was sort of like, Roman, have you had such a dry spell that you're reacting more strongly than usual to kissing because you're just extra horny? Is that what's going on here? What is this? And I am not trying to shade people who make noise during sex. I personally really like that. I like signals that I'm doing the right thing, or maybe that I'm not, so that I can change to something else. I need and like those indicators. But Roman is reacting when there's very little actually happening. And so it feels fake, even though I don't think it's actually insincere. I don't feel like Roman's like putting on a show. I think that it's sort of automatic and not actually generated from a place of like enjoyment of a sensation. It's just more of a reaction to the situation, which there's nothing technically wrong with that. But I definitely understand why later Abby is like, oh my God, the sound you make, it is so distracting. Because that's really the thing. Like, you can do and be into whatever you want in terms of sex, as long as you have the consent of the other person or persons involved. But they also have the right to really not be into the same thing. And sometimes you've just got to like find a compromise and be like, okay, you know what? Look, clearly we are not on the same page with this. Let's find a different thing that works. And you can't help things like just something that takes you out of the moment and makes you distracted. Even as much as you may understand that they can't help it, or that it's, you know, whatever you're reacting to isn't an inherently bad thing. If you have to stop and sort of like tell yourself anything in the middle of sex, that is by nature taking you out of the moment because you are in your head. And when you try to have sex, being in your head is the exact wrong place to be. Sex is so much worse if you are trying to analyze it. It's just a total boner killer, both for you and for the other person. So anyway, this whole thing ends with Abby purposely tipping over a candle and lighting the carpet on fire, which leads to a panic moment where she tries to pretend that it's an accident, but it turns out later Roman can see, like, he doesn't know for sure, but he's very much like that. I'm pretty sure she did that on purpose. And Roman is like, I think it's Abby who gets up and gets a blanket to put the fire out and doesn't even like ask. She just tosses it down, and it turns out to be a blanket that Roman's grandmother made that is now like got a massive hole in it and it is destroyed. And you guys, I was so sad. Like, you know, anytime that you have a sort of, what's the word I want? Like a memento, I get the impression, and I may be wrong, that Roman's grandmother is dead. And, you know, maybe she's not, and that would still be something that's fine to be upset about. But especially if she has gone, and now you have lost this thing that she like handmade for you. Oh, that's so devastating, truly. Like really, really sad. But anyway, yeah. So, okay, it is Abby that puts the blanket down. Ugh, sucks. I do want to register too that Roman's bed is so dope. Like, there's a cushioned, very like plush green headboard, and then these like deep teal satin sheets with pink like velvety blankets. There's just a ton of texture and really deep jewel tone colors, and I am into it. So after that, we get the apology from O. And you guys, I am so glad that everybody calls O out for the bullshit that this is, because a bitch didn't actually apologize to the person she harmed. She apologizes to her fans, basically. She apologizes to everybody who like believed in her, and, you know, just like a general sort of public relations announcement. But it comes off as so self-serving. And I don't want to say that it's insincere, because I actually think it is sincere. I just think that O is really thoughtless. And we've been given some, you know, some moments with O this season that I can't tell whether or not I'm supposed to have sort of come around on her. I really don't know if that was the point. I kind of feel like maybe the show is just like, we're going to make O a full character, and we're not necessarily going to make them somebody that has a redemption arc so much as somebody that like you have complicated feelings about, which I really do respect, because it's very easy to redeem everybody and make it all just like a happy, you know. And I like wrapped this season up even after O goes and apologizes to Ruby. I was like, no, but I don't feel it for you though. I don't like you. I didn't like you and the way you handled shit, really. almost from the start. Like, I had a weird vibe from her initially, the way that Otis reacted to her and how first he immediately assumed that she was a guy and then immediately was like, well, you have to close up shop because I did it first. I was very much like, wait, what, Otis? The fuck? And I saw that O was definitely good at the job, but from then on, everything about the way that she like came at Otis seemed shitty to me. And then we find out about the whole thing with Ruby, and that was extra shitty. And from then, it's just been her being fucking awful and insufferable, like one scene after another. And I am willing to accept that Ruby accepted the apology. But I'm going to do with O what I do with my friends when somebody else, like, is harmed. If O had, for example, done this to Rashawn, and Rashawn accepted the apology and wanted to move on with her life, fine, I would accept that's what Rashawn wanted, but I would also hold that grudge on Rashawn's behalf for as long as I needed to do it, because there's just no obligation for me to forgive. My forgiveness isn't part of the equation. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to go ahead and not forgive because I get to. And sometimes just holding on to some bitterness is fine. You know, I think that there's a little bit of healthiness to that. I'm going to be honest. I don't think like fully forgiving everybody all the time is healthy, because I don't think it's actually really possible to live that way. I think if you tell yourself you are living that way, you are in denial about some of your real feelings. But anyway, so the thing that I had also missed talking about last episode, and you guys are probably were listening and were just like, what? I can't believe she didn't mention it, is that Maeve and Otis finally had sex, but also finally broke up. And it seems like the show had been going to sort of let them do their own things, but have them hung up on each other for a little bit. If they were going into another season, I was going to assume that there was like, I would have to assume that Maeve would come back eventually, because I didn't see the show having Maeve stay in a totally different place and then have Adam also in a totally different place, and us following all of these like extremely, at this point, disparate storylines because everybody isn't at the same school. So I kind of figured that she might be able to return and they would start the next school year with her back and the program over. I don't even know if they had another year of school or not. Like, I don't remember how schooling years work and what year they're meant to be in this season. But you know, the talk that Maeve had with Jean led her to having some more confidence in herself, which leads to a really awful scene later where Otis is having breakfast and his mother is really trying. You know, she's taking these antidepressants and she is attempting to like accept help, and things seem to be a little bit more cheerful and under control for the moment. And she's made breakfast and he's eating and things feel like maybe we're looking up. And then she mentions that she advised Maeve to like continue to pursue her dreams. And Otis, of course, lashes out and basically tells his mother, you made her break up with me. She'd still be here if it wasn't for you. You keep interfering in my life. And I really wanted Jean to slap him across the face for this. After everything that has been said about how little he cares about other people to Otis by various characters in this show, I really wanted Jean to point out, it's really weird how you think I'm interfering in your life when I was advising Maeve to do what was best for her and independent of what is good for you, because her life is actually about her, Otis, not about you, which you seem to be fucking forgetting. He eventually comes around to that point, But I wanted her to say that to him because I felt like Jean really took a lot of shit from him this season that she didn't need to take. And there were points where he clearly had some like trauma about the way that she completely disappeared on him after her divorce. That is real and something that needs to be dealt with, yes. But he was being deeply unfair. And this was just another moment of him turning a decision that was a big step for Maeve believing in herself and pursuing something that mattered to her and taking a real risk. And he made it all about him and nobody really called him on it, you know? And I just wanted to feel like there was a point in this season where it wasn't just that Otis understood about Eric individually or about Maeve individually. I wanted Otis to really step back and see his pattern of being deeply self-absorbed. And I'm not really sure if he saw it or not. It kind of felt like he didn't. You know, I don't know. But anyway, that like argument, he's in the middle of it when her sister comes back in and yells at him for talking to his mother that way. She does everything for you. Like, you know, she really, really defends her sister hard, which was sweet. I always enjoy that, like, phenomenon of like two people getting in each other's faces and they love each other and have this really close relationship and they will go at each other's throats. But the instant like some outsider comes in and tries to go after one of them, they band together immediately. I've just always really liked that trope. Ashleigh says, I actually kind of like the relationship ending like this. I know it probably wasn't intended to be permanent, but frankly, I think Maeve can do better. Amen, Ashleigh. I heartily agree. So the sex, it was sort of funny because like it was just built up so much that a part of me was like, I don't even know if I really want to see it, you know? And we do see it fine. I didn't feel like Otis just looks too young to be having sex. He still looks like he's like 12 years old to me. But the fact that like this is the goodbye and they're going no contact, I felt the same way with him and Maeve that I felt about him going no contact for a while with Eric. Good. You know, like sometimes they're just people who sometimes you've got to cut off from your life for a little while to see how you get along without them and see how you feel without their presence or their judgment or their commentary, because it can be shockingly like pleasant when you thought I you know, don't think I can live without this person. And then suddenly you are living without them and you realize, wow, I'm not like clenching my jaw anymore. I'm sleeping better. Why am I feeling like more optimistic? And it's just because this fucking toxic person isn't in your life. And I really feel like Maeve, I think that she needs to let go of Moordale. She needs to just move on and pursue bigger, better things and cut ties. And even like, I mean this also in terms of her brother, who evidently ran off so that he could get sober, which I'll believe it when I see it. But she does not need that place holding her back anymore. And it really was. So I fully agree, Ashleigh. Ashleigh says, see, I can never not see him as the boy in the striped pajamas kid, so that probably doesn't help. Oh, was he that kid? I feel like you told me this, Ashleigh, one time, and I already had forgotten again, because I never saw that movie. But, Jesus. That's a dark one. So, all right, that's that for getting up like to speed with Otis and Maeve. I will say I was really glad that eventually Otis does get what Eric was trying to tell him. And they wind up having like, I think they're going to another one of those like queer disco parties or whatever it's called. And this time Otis is fully involved in the get ready process. And it was just really nice. I love when they've perfected his outfit and in unison, him and Eric do the like snap snap thing, because every time I get a reminder of how in sync the two of them can be, it really helps to cement how much time they spend together. How much, despite seeing Otis as sort of like a wet blanket, how much Eric influences him, and to me makes him better. And it's just really sweet, you know? It makes me think of, there was, I think in the second season, when Eric is with Adam and he's like, or no, I don't think he is with Adam. I think he was talking with, what's his name? Rahul? I can't remember his name, but, Raheem. But he is telling Otis, like, I'm going all the way tonight. And he starts to sing a song and like go up the steps while singing and doing sort of a dance in rhythm. And Otis like falls in step right with him doing the same dance. And it's just such a good moment. And so this little moment in this episode really harkened back to that for me. And I was like, oh, okay, look at you two. But anyway, so yeah, the whole like Eric's plotline is really tough, guys. I have so many mixed feelings because I love where we wind up. I really do. And I want to be more on board with the magical realism of the thing. But I just don't feel like it's well done. That's what it comes down to. We could have had magical realism that leads Eric towards certain decisions that were somewhat more subtle than literally God showed up and talked to you. And I just maintain that that was not the direction to go. It felt really weird. It felt totally out of step with the tone of the rest of the show. It felt totally like, just considering like the gravity of the struggle that Eric is going through, it felt almost too lighthearted in comparison with the battle that he's like fighting with himself. It just, it diminished his storyline for me in a way that I found really unfortunate, because I was excited at the fact that they were depicting the difficulty with somebody who has a certain faith that doesn't seem to support their identity as a human being. And instead of it being made like a little bit more understandable to people from the outside, it got turned into what felt like a totally over the top joke. And I don't think it was meant to be seen as a joke. I don't, but I feel like it reads as a joke in a way that it shouldn't. I think it, like, that's the worst kind of joke, is like the unintentional kind. And I just, you know, it was a difficult thing, especially like I've already talked a lot about watching this with Owen and the religious upbringing that he was brought up in. But I really do think it's important because it lent a specific tone to the watching experience of these episodes. And despite knowing how toxic and dangerous Christianity has been in terms of like legislation and oppression in the United States and elsewhere, I have a respect for the fact that there are still people who believe in it and connect with it, and for whom it feels like home and something safe that is helpful for them in a way of living their lives day to day. And so I really want to respect that, because as much as my father was difficult with his beliefs, they also saved his life. They also kept him from overdosing again. They also cleaned him up and made him overall a better person, a more difficult person, and a more rigid and uptight person for a long time. But ultimately, they improved his life, like having this tenet to live by. So I try and have a lot of patience for this, even though I know the harm that it can do also. And Owen doesn't have the same experience as I do. I was brought up with one parent who had started off one way, found religion, and turned a corner, and I could see, despite some misgivings, that things were better. Owen grew up with this faith from birth, every member of his family, and all he saw was just the way that it seemed to hamstring people and make them like bigoted and myopic. So he went into Eric's storyline with a lot less patience than I did. And I was looking forward to seeing how it unfolded, because I was thinking that maybe he would begin to see what it was they were doing and feel like, all right, some people have a different relationship with their religion than I do, a different community. But instead they went so hard with the, like, God is actually visiting him, that he lost any semblance of patience he had and immediately just began to write Eric's story off entirely. And I was just so disappointed, because I wanted there to be like a little bit of understanding there, and I felt like they lost him entirely. And I don't know about other people's experience, but yeah, it just bummed me out. So Ashleigh says, I guess the overtness of God sending Eric to save Cal was supposed to be showing that God themselves loves and protects Cal and other trans people, regardless of what the church itself might say. But yeah, it just feels so weird and poorly done, and I personally don't like it at all. I'm glad to hear that I'm not alone in that, because yeah, like, you could have done something, you could have had Eric being led to where Cal was done in a very different way that is not explicitly God. You know, what if literally like somebody's pet dog like snatched his bag and took off with it, and he's just chasing like what seems like a random dog? What if you know, there's a breeze that catches an important paper out of his hand, and he just begins to like tear through the trees because he absolutely needs it? And just there's a million ways to have it feel like he is being led to help, and that there is a very strong hand pushing him in a certain direction, without it feeling like we have the actual personification of God here also telling you that you need to like do something with your congregation. I feel like it would have been more powerful in a way for Eric to come to that conclusion on his own, to take a stand and push his congregation without being told explicitly that this is what he was meant to be doing. Call me crazy, but taking a stand without the certainty that God has your back is way more brave to me than the other way. So I just felt like unintentionally the show totally undercut what they were attempting with him and kind of ruined it. And I'm just sad about it, because I feel like maybe there's something I'm not getting. Like maybe there is something specifically in Nigerian faith, like, because, you know, there's so many versions of Christianity, and maybe there is something to the depiction that is meant to be specific to like the African experience, Nigerian specifically, of Christianity and the types of tales that are told. But just for me, it didn't work at all. However, I did love how intensely vulnerable he made himself, because he decides to agree to get baptized, and he shows up, and the guy that he hooked up with at that queer night says something about how he has done things in the past that have made him unclean. There is just so much shame pouring off him, and the rebuke is not just meant for him, but also for Eric. And I can't help but think that, like, until Eric makes his stand, that he thinks Eric is doing this for the same reasons that he is. And there are so many people who do this, you know, so many people who go through getting baptized, specifically baptized, because they believe that once they are baptized, the desire for things they feel they shouldn't want will go away. And I know that this was a thing with my father with becoming born again, because he had been bisexual and all of a sudden now he was just straight, which, no, you weren't, babe, but okay, sure. And there's a really great short story. I don't know if it's still up on his website, but Marco Shiro wrote about his experience. Marco Shiro of Mark Does Stuff, getting baptized when he was old enough to realize that he was gay, and like expecting that once the baptism had finished, he would stand up and be straight, and the panic he felt when he realized that had not happened. And it's just heartbreaking, because like these are people who truly believe they are wrong, and that they're going to have something out there that will fix them. And low key, that's not what they're being told, basically, you know? So him standing up and just being like, this is who I am. Are you guys going to have my back or not? And the only person to have his back is his mother. And I'm so glad. I really miss Eric's father, just for the record. He really had such a small part. So I get maybe not being able to return after that, you know, second season. But I do really wish for just this like last episode that we had gotten to see him one last time and see him have his son's back too, because it is kind of glaring that his dad isn't there after he was such a presence at first. And eventually, you know, at the school, the pastor shows up and is like, I want to begin to open a dialogue and figure out how we can make this work, you know, how we can begin to reach out and be more inclusive. And the whole thing, I skipped over this, but the whole thing is brought on by the fact that the fundraising that they had done for the soup kitchen was going to be rejected because of who raised the money, which is just so fucking disgusting. I can't even fathom it. Like, I really want to know what the fuck is wrong with people's priorities to the point that they're like, we'll let this soup kitchen close before we'll let people go hungry and maybe starve before we accept money from folks who have sex we don't like. What is wrong with you? What is the, like, genuinely, how fucked up is that? I just can't understand it. So anyway, it seems like it's going to be a long road ahead, but they are at least making a gesture by the end of the episode that indicates to me, I think that basically Eric walked out. His mother, who had been supporting him, was left standing there like, you fucking assholes. And then she went straight to the pastor and was like, the hell is wrong with you? And I don't know what kind of argument she made, but whatever it was, it seemed like she had her son's back seriously. And I'm really proud of that. So speaking of, with the, like, God leading Eric to finding Cal, Ashleigh says, unless they're having sex on the food, no one's sexual preferences should be relevant to the food being served. Amen. Exactly. So Cal has been having, like, slowly increasing incidences of body dysmorphia as the season has continued. And Cal's situation is so difficult because it is something that I have a lot of sympathy for and understand in an abstract way, but it is so difficult for me to really get it at a gut level, you know? And I hadn't realized that the way Cal was feeling had gotten to this point. But there was a scene in the previous episode where Cal was talking to Roman about his top surgery and how much it cost. And Roman says, like, it was $10,000 and my family paid for it, which I really appreciated how serious the show is about telling us the real numbers and pointing out that some people have the privilege of having that money and others don't. And, like, depending on the kind of insurance you have, it may or may not cover certain things too. Like, elective surgeries are practically unheard of as covered under insurance in the United States. But if you've got real good insurance, perhaps. And the fact that this is just the reality for healthcare overall. But when you try and make the argument that, like, somebody who gets cancer shouldn't go into debt because they had cancer, people will agree with that immediately. It's not your fault you had cancer. At least most people will say that. It's not everybody. And we should help because that's an illness and your life's on the line. But when you try and talk to people about trans healthcare supporting people's identities, people always argue that this is a choice and that this sort of thing is not necessary, like medicine, that this is an elective that is, sure, would they feel better if they had it? Sure, but I'd feel better with a boob job, and that isn't worthy of being covered. And it's just like, it's so, first of all, it's so not the same thing as just, you know, getting a boob job because you want bigger boobs. Think of it more as like, you have something going on with your body that interferes every day with the way that people perceive you in a really, really significant sense. For example, there will be surgeries that are covered with insurance for if somebody has a disfiguring scar or something on their face to do reconstructive surgery, you know, or if they get in a car accident and they have something happen that like mashes their bones and they need to, that kind of thing. It's also cosmetic, but we all sort of understand your face is what you present to the world and is important. And sure, maybe you can get along with like certain things being different from everyone else, but if your face is totally different, then you're going to have a more difficult time moving through the world in general in every sense. And that is just accepted and understood, I think, by a lot of people in a way that I wish they could translate to body dysmorphia and what it must feel like to be seen as a different gender than you feel you are. And I say feel you are, even though it is really, you're being seen as a different gender than you are. I don't want people to take me saying feel you are as like waffling on the subject. I mean, you know your gender, and people should just fucking accept that. But because we are trained to see certain signals as indicators of gender, if you don't have control over some of those signals and you can't get rid of them, then the people who see you are going to continue to misgender you because of that. And it's going to interfere with the way that you feel every single day. I mean, I think I've said it before, but I will say again, the best comparison I ever heard was somebody who said, I think a lot of people mistake the way to think through what it would be like to be trans. And they think, what would it feel like to believe that I am the wrong gender? But instead, I encourage you to think of it as, what if you were a woman who looked so much like a man that you simply had to pretend to be one every day? And that recontextualized it for me completely. And I was like, oh, like it just, all of a sudden, the way the wording was done of just like, it's not that you are seen as a woman but feel a different way. It's that you are a man, but you are, your shell causes you to have to fake your whole life, which is just a completely different energy. The way that was phrased helped me a lot. So I repeat it a lot in the hopes that other people listening who haven't heard it, it may help them too. So anyway, Cal's like out here on this cliff, and they have been struggling so badly for days. And it's really tough knowing that their mother has been genuinely trying to reach out, but didn't know what to do, because Cal feels so alone here. And their mom was attempting to be there. Like, I'm not trying to say that she didn't fuck up initially, because clearly by her own admission, she did. But I just felt so bad for her that her child, like, she was just in totally alien territory. She did not know how to handle things. And she fucked up and didn't know how to make it right. And everything she attempted, it seemed like she was pushing her kid away more. And it must just have been really hard. You know, I think a lot of parents have a strong reaction to finding out that their kids' identities are different than what they thought, simply because there is a threat to the feeling of, I am supposed to know this child and I don't, it turns out. Like, a lot of authority figures want to feel as if they know everything there is to know, more so than the person themselves. Even though they're a child, they're a person. And I think we forget that. So anyway, this whole situation, the entire school mobilizes to find Cal. And eventually there's this amazing scene where they need to see some CCTV footage, and the girl who has access to it is being very unwilling to cooperate until Ruby pops up. And since she's basically like a celebrity because of being so popular, this girl instantly acquiesces to showing them all of the tapes, which leads to them seeing Cal coming into the burger place in the middle of the day and shoving their backpack into the trash, which was sort of a weird move that I didn't fully understand. But I think it was just meant to be like a signal that they were about to abandon their life. And this actually doesn't like lead to finding Cal. It's just a nice moment of everybody sort of agreeing that Cal matters. And eventually, when Eric is led to exactly where Cal is, Jackson suddenly remembers. And I think that Jackson and Cal smoked up one time and went to this cliff or something. And so Jackson is suddenly like, oh my God, I think I know where Cal is, and just takes off. And I don't know if it was like intentional or not, but I did sort of like that in the end, the people that are gathered around Cal comforting them are also both black. And, you know, Cal had dated Aisha, and there's a part of me that sometimes is like, why does Cal have to date the only other black characters? You know, like but also there is a reality to the fact that Black people are going to group together because they feel safe with each other. And that's just life, you know, that's how that works a lot of the time. So there was a part of me for a moment that was sort of like, come on. And then I was like, it's fine. It's not a big deal. Ashleigh says, I guess it's one of the first things you, quote, know about your child is the sex of the baby. And a lot of cis people not realizing that's not the same thing as knowing your child's gender. That to have something you thought you fundamentally knew shown to be wrong, I can see how that could be a bit of an adjustment for some parents. Absolutely. I think that what it comes down to, and this is true of a lot of stuff when it comes to children, from what I have observed, is that people have got a real difficult time acknowledging that children are full human beings. They really want to see children as like partially finished, and once they grow up, they will be who they are. But they're actually full people from the start. And I just think we have a difficult time grasping that because children aren't good at communicating that a lot of the time. So we don't respect that reality and can be very dismissive and condescending about things unintentionally. We mean well a lot, I think, but ultimately our job is to hear what the kid is saying to us about themselves. And I just find it really funny when people try and claim that like anyone would, you know, say that they were trans or gay just because they've been influenced by TV or media. Like, that is just such a complete rarity. There is so much stigma associated with coming out that nobody is going to take that risk unless they're feeling pretty fucking sure, especially with parents they know are going to probably react badly. It's just wild anytime that I hear people suggest that this is like a lark that somebody is just doing for attention. It's like, do you know the danger they're putting themselves in? Like, why? Most people are not going to be willing to do that. But anyway, so I'm trying to I can't believe how much time I've run out of, you guys. There's a whole thing that's going on as well with Amy and Isaac. And I was so relieved, like I said, that Maeve backed off on that. The two of them, like, are very slowly hooking up. And Amy almost is, like, ready for a kiss. And then she sort of backs up and kisses him on the cheek. And explains that she is still having a hard time, but she's feeling like she's getting more comfortable with the idea of eventually having sex. And she also has done this like photo series of her with these jeans and just sort of like moving through the reality of this being a part of her life now that she's just going to have to cope with. And him understanding that and really being highly respectful and like, you know, we'll take as much time as you need. And I love when he says we can go as slow as you need. And I think she says something like, I know, because she doesn't need his permission to go as slow as she needs. And I liked that they just sort of, you know, poked a hole in him acting like he is giving permission. But yeah, so the two of them, they're working towards some things, and they have like a cute sort of hookup moment where she has taken the like arms off of his chair, and she has a point of like accidentally hitting something so that they go rolling for a second. And I have never had sex with anybody in a wheelchair, but I bet that there were people watching who have and who saw that little moment with the chair and they were like, yup, been there. That just struck me as like a really, really true thing. So we also have this situation with Adam. And you guys, this was for me the high point of this episode and the way the show wrapped. I really loved Adam as a character so deeply. He took me so by surprise. And the growth of his parents has been huge. And the way that he reacted to his father, while I knew he was wrong, was so understandable. It was just devastating. And the first thing that happens in this episode regarding this is that Cal having disappeared, Adam's father begins to get worried, wondering if, since he hasn't heard from Adam, could something have happened to both of them? Is there like a link there? And I sort of liked this because as viewers, we know Cal and Adam don't really have a relationship. There's no reason that the two of them being MIA would be related. But from the perspective of a parent, I definitely get why one kid being missing and you haven't heard from yours, you would start to just, your imagination would spin wildly out of control. And he is just reaching out like, hey, what's going on? I haven't heard from you. And eventually he just goes to Adam's work. And he's like, hey, I need you to know I do like you. I don't like myself. That's the issue. And he says, like, the child that went missing at school made me start to think about what would happen if anything were to have happened to you, with you still thinking that I don't like you. And when he says that, Adam immediately, well, you don't like me. Like, he is so certain. So certain. But yeah, no, Adam, I do like you very much. I don't like myself. I love you. And it's just the emotional, like, hit of this, you guys, was so good. And every now and then the camera will have it angled in such a way that you can see the two of them in profile, and they really do look so alike. They nailed it with the fucking casting here. And he just says, if I've made you feel small, I regret it. I really do. But I can't get that time back. All I can do is change. And I'm really trying. And then Adam is like, do you want to hug a horse? And he's like, well, no, I don't think so. But then he comes forward and is like, I would like to hug you. And it's so great because at first it's sort of awkward. It continues on with being awkward, but it's awkward in a way of like, it's so genuine now. And Adam is just off guard, and his father is so, like, weepy. And finally, there's a mention of like, hey, you have a class to teach. And his father participates in the horseback riding class. Kids, there is not enough for me, like enough words for me to get across how much I fucking loved this. I got so choked up over the fact that he's like attending the class and learning how to ride from apparently scratch. Like, it doesn't seem like he's ever ridden before. And later on tells his wife that Adam taught this class and was excellent at it. It feels so good to finally see Adam doing something well, being allowed to succeed, that it was done in view of his father, that he didn't lose his nerve while teaching just because his dad was there, because things have moved forward a little bit. And ultimately what happens is that Adam asks his dad if he wants to stay and like watch some trashy TV show they're watching. And so they have a little like family evening on the couch sitting together. And there's a real sense of maybe we are going to be able to be a family again in the future. And it made me so happy. It just really did. This was so satisfying. It was so well done, well paced, and realistic in terms of the stops and starts, the forward movement, and then, you know, stepping away again. And considering where things started with Adam as a bully and his father being awful, I never thought we would end up here. And I never would have thought that we'd end up here and that I would believe it. And I definitely do. So yeah, it was just so good. So now let's talk about Maeve, because it turns out that Maeve's roommate submitted her writing after reading it and apparently thinking it was remarkable to the publishers that she had contact with because of her internship. And they want more. They're so impressed with it that they're looking for additional work from her, like the next few chapters. And I love the fact that when Maeve goes and talks to her roommate, the reaction the roommate's having is like, first of all, I'm not going to lie to you, it really sucked how much more interested they were in you than me after I was the one who got the scholarship. But also, I'll be fine. Maybe I'll go be a banker. And it just becomes so clear that this girl was given this internship, but it didn't mean the same thing to her as it would have meant to her, to Maeve herself, or to Tyrone, I think his name is. That this woman has a lot of options, you know, and she turns out to not be good at something, and she can immediately turn a corner and do something else. Whereas Maeve turns out to not be good at this, and she doesn't feel like she has other options. Maybe she does, but she doesn't feel that way right now, and I get that. So I really, really love that Maeve, she is getting some flowers here, that it's coming from somebody that she otherwise was in competition with, but that person, despite being really privileged and a little, oblivious, that they aren't a bad person, and that they didn't sit on Maeve's work because they felt threatened. You know, she hands it in because she is impressed and wants Maeve to succeed, because she is generous, actually. And I really like that. You know, I wouldn't mind seeing more of this character if there were going to be another season, and the development between the two of them. And it was just, I really, really liked it. And then eventually Maeve goes to see the professor, and he says, I know that I was being hard on you, but I was just trying to make you a better writer. The way he phrases this made me so angry, because I really thought I was going to get an apology. And instead, it's him trying to pretend that the criticism he gave was coming from a very different place than what it actually was. We know that's not what it was. You were really... There was no... Maeve says this too. She's like, look, I don't know if that's truly why you said what you said, but even if it were, it absolutely devastated me. And you need to know that I almost quit the program because of what you said. I am not somebody who comes from a background with a lot of support and people telling me that I am good at things. I know a lot of people at this school, if they're told they're bad at something, they would just be like, fuck you, I'm going to keep doing it. I'll show you. that's not the way I was raised, and I don't have that sort of faith in myself a lot of the time. So you almost devastated my future. And I don't have the safety net that they do. You know, this girl talking about, oh, maybe I'll just go into banking. Like, she doesn't have that. So you're probably going to meet other students who are like me, and you need to be very aware that the words you use are important and they hold a lot of power. And I went home and I had to just like regroup and remind myself what my priorities are, and that you aren't going to get to be somebody who stands in the way just, by yourself, telling me I can't have things. And he says, okay. And then he says, and I loved this because it's as much of an admission as we're going to get. He says, it's just not easy sometimes watching all of you at the beginning. And when he says that, he gets really choked up and he looks away. And to me, that is him saying, you're about to be a big deal, and my sun is setting. And it's just really hard to watch. And that is fucking reality, man. Like, I felt him in that. It's easy to despise somebody like this, but as a woman who is aging and watching other amazing, talented, beautiful, like, kind-hearted young women become fully realized in the world. Some of them are people that I know really well. It's really difficult sometimes because I am simultaneously happy for them and glad they exist because the world needs them. But you can't help but feel homesick for the way things had been for you, because now you appreciate it because either A, you don't have it anymore, and that's how that works sometimes, or simply you're old enough now to understand the power you once had, and that you kind of maybe squandered some things because you didn't use it the way you could have. And then you come into that weird spot where it's like, how do you keep from that resentment showing toward people who don't deserve it? And how do you like help them fully realize their power while they can, without trying to just control their lives? And I don't know, his acting here, he was like very unlikable, but also really relatable and understandable. And I liked the way that she said, yeah, in response. It felt like it contained a great deal of grace, And when she finally leaves, there's like one moment of the camera just on him, and there's a sense of like feeling shame, and I appreciated it because sometimes we aren't our best. We just aren't. So coming back around to Cal. Ooh, sorry. I'm so over time, but I don't care. I'm just going to keep going. Ashleigh says, this felt so well earned in watching previous scenes that I never would have expected to be happy to see the three of them back together. Oh, right. Regarding Adam and his parents. There's 4 if you count the sister that was mentioned in season 1 and then just never appeared on screen. Ooh, I don't remember her even. So, but yeah, hard agree. So the thing with Cal, what I really liked about the way they handled Cal, and I appreciate you, by the way, Ashleigh, like letting me know there's going to be a suicide scare, but it's going to turn out to be okay. I've pretty much gotten to the point with this show that I trust that they would not have Cal commit suicide, because that would just be such a devastating move for a show that isn't like, I feel like that would just be such a basic, like 1995 depiction of, like not just queerness in general, but there was just something about how like it always has to include tragedy, and I was like, I really don't think that they would do that at this point. I feel confident enough. They had that scare with Lily that one season, but then when they didn't do this, I was like, okay, I feel like I get what the show's doing. However, what they do is, despite Cal being quite literally like talked off the ledge, they are not just okay. And that's what I really liked. Cal knows that everybody cares, knows that the whole school was looking for them. Cal is at home in bed and isolated, but not like it's very clear, despite the fact that they are still recovering, that they're not in the same headspace they were. And it turns out they're going to use the fundraiser to pay for Cal's top surgery, which hadn't even occurred to me. I thought with this whole thing that it would turn out to be like, we're going to donate towards some suicide prevention charity for queer teens, you know, but it being so personal and specific about I really liked that, like it being for top surgery, being something that is for Cal, a very specific type of support. I thought was such a great idea and had never entered my mind. And I can't tell you the like, oh my God, that I let out when Aisha said that's what they were doing. And I love the fact that like later on, Jackson's texting, and even though Cal is smiling and seems glad to hear from Jackson, they do not reply because it's just a little too much for them right now. However, you can see between the way their friend stepped up and the way their mother stepped up, they're heading in a better direction. And I thought it was just a really nice balance between an optimistic ending that feels like we're heading somewhere good without it being like instantly Cal feels better, feels loved, and suddenly everything has turned around for them. Like that is not how that tends to work. And I respected how restrained they were about the way Cal is feeling. And I'm just trying to see if there's anything else that I miss. Oh, well, there's the big apology with Otis as well, where he's just like, you know, I really was threatened by O, and O, I think, is better at this, like, because we have that final scene between O, Otis, Roman, Abby, and Aisha, where Abby is insisting that they stop gossiping. The first thing that it was Aisha and Roman saying that we felt like O's apology was really fake. And Abby's like, that was really mean, guys. And I'm like, it really wasn't, actually. They get to express how they felt about it. Like, that's incredibly rude of you to say that they can't talk about, like, how dare you? I was so disgusted. And I was very, very glad that later on, there was the confrontation about that. And just like sometimes we like gossiping. It's fun. And we get to say that we feel negatively about stuff. And Abby finally tells Roman the truth about like the sounds he makes being really distracting. She adds some things that are none of her business, like what Aisha does to her nails in class. I don't know about that, but it's just sort of a breakthrough for her that she can like talk about negative things, and maybe it isn't inherently negative to do that. But it did feel kind of abrupt. It felt like, you know, the point of it was really that O is the one who links the fact that Abby's issues with negativity might be linked to her sex life with Roman, whereas Otis had told Roman like to talk privately with Abby about their sex life, and O is the one who's sort of like, no, I think those might have something to do with each other. So that's what leads to him like sort of conceding to O, because as it turns out, their friend, what's his face, he won the election, but he says, you guys have a lot of problems and they're gross, and I don't want this job. The only reason that I wanted to get the job was so that I could be on your mom's radio show because your mom is insanely hot, which was very funny, actually. So this eventually leads to Ruby going up on stage, and she admits that, like, I love the way she says that the school has made her start to have feelings, and that maybe everything that you guys say about being better people, I thought it was just a load of crap. And she's saying all of this with this huge eye rolling, but she's just like, I've realized you're trying to make the world a better place. And she just like every word, it's like disgusting to her to say. And it makes me want to be better. Hugely resentful. I loved this speech so much. I loved it so much. You guys don't understand. It was so great. So she's like, I think that what we should do is give O another chance. And so, you know, her reaching out, it's what gets everybody sort of back on board here. And it's just, I thought, really, really well done. Right. Thank you, Ashleigh. Again, so over time, but this is the last thing I'll say. Viv. I'm so excited, you guys. I was really concerned. Even when Viv had clearly seen through Beau last episode and realized he was bad news, I was so worried that when she told him not to come near her, that it was going to erupt into some sort of violence this episode. And I was really glad it didn't. She just comes up to him and she tells him, you are going to leave me the fuck alone. Because he keeps texting, he keeps trying to come up to her. And luckily she has her friends around her all the time. And they are just like ready to throw down. They do not care. But she decides she is going to walk up to him and she tells him, I don't want to hear from you. I have been very clear. And if you ever contact me again, I'll report you. And it seems like that does the trick and he backs off. Unfortunately, this is sort of rarely the case. Reporting him doesn't do a whole lot in the real world, which is deeply unfortunate. But her taking this stand and advocating for herself and standing up to him was just wonderful to watch. And I was so relieved that we didn't have a whole issue with him, like, trying to turn the tables on her somehow or go after Jackson even. You know, I wasn't sure what I was thinking, but I was just very paranoid because men are crazy. So, and you can quote me on that. But yeah, so I feel like that's pretty much everything. I just really, really loved like almost everything about this finale. And I felt like it hit the right note in every direction in terms of people like gradually coming to see the way that they were unfair to somebody else. And it ends with, just Otis like looking out his window and this slow like pull away shot that I think is a drone probably, but it's very beautiful. And it's the first time that we've really seen like where his house sits in relationship to the whole rest of their neighborhood and everything. And this whole area, I feel like I read that it was in Wales, but I might be wrong about that. But wow, it's beautiful. And yeah, I just thought it was a very, very solid series finale, even though there were some things that had been started that they could certainly have built off of. It stands very solidly as a series finale. And I think they should be proud of themselves. So yeah, this is so much fun. Thank you again, Ashleigh, very much for commissioning this. I hope everybody has enjoyed the coverage. Sorry this episode was so long. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.